All right, so I'm unmuting myself, and this is the first time I'm running it without the laptop. And yeah, I know I know because I can kind of hear myself in the back. So I know the audio is definitely good, and um, I will take that away as well. Full screen that. Come over here, and yeah, all right, good. All right, so I think this is class number 6 or 7. Pretty sure it's 7, but I put 6 in the title anyway, just to be safe. I can change it later. So it's good to see some new faces in the office. And anybody who's new and watching on the internet, it's good to see you too. For people who don't know, I am a congressional candidate running here in the Bronx against Richie Torres. Um, Richie Torres is a NATO tool, a genocidalist, and he is quite frankly insane and a blank slate. And he is told what to say, and he actually has no real ideas. Unlike the people in this room, unlike the people of the Bronx, who deserve to be represented by people, not by individuals, by people who actually care about humanity and have some love for humanity. And today we saw that expression of love on our IPC calls. So every Friday morning we have what's called an International Peace Coalition call. This is over 50 nations at one point have joined these calls where we address an audience composed of people from around the world with a panel composed of people from around the world. Today, most notably, we had a Professor Ted Postal, who is to call him an expert would be understating what he can actually contribute to the discussion today. His understanding of the danger of nuclear weapons and the danger of nuclear war, as well as being around people who've made policy decisions in regards to how we should respond or even begin to attempt to have a first strike nuclear war. This is the people he's been around, and today he shared what he knows with the group of people who are on this call today, as well as Colonel Larry Wilkerson, who is part of the Eisenhower Media Group, who was also, I believe, the chief of staff to Colin Powell. He was there when Colin Powell testified at the UN that they had found credible evidence of weapons of mass destruction. And he had that little vial there of, was it uranium, right? That he showed that they had some uranium, right? And that this was then therefore a reason why we must invade the Middle East and start these forever wars over and over again. And now Colonel Larry Wilkerson and the people like this are not just repenting for what they did, but are playing an active role in stopping the destruction of humanity. And so this IPC call not only showed the starkness of humanity and its capability to destroy and annihilate itself, but the potential. The potential for some good to come out of this tragedy and this conflict where people of all different political creeds and stripes are forced to come together to figure out a real solution. Because we cannot afford to have purity tests and say, well, this person isn't Democratic enough or Republican enough or green enough. If you care about humanity and if you want to be alive to make sure we don't blow ourselves up so we can continue to argue about these things, you're going to have to put aside your differences and realize that if you actually want to help your neighborhood, your home, your country, you have to care about the fact that we are sleepwalking into World War III. And so as the world continues to get worse, we also find a growing coalition of people who want to reject that. And so in the words of Friedrich Schiller, a great evil provokes an even greater good. But what is that greater good exactly? Is it just a rejection of evil? But what is a rejection of evil? What do you replace ugliness with? Nothing? Is it just a negative piece then? Do you just say, great, we stop the killing, and then what? A ceasefire in Gaza, and then what? Some estimates have the death toll at around 200,000 dead people in Palestine. How do we ensure that a ceasefire is not only permanent, but that there is never a war outbreak again? We replace those with ideas. Ideas that promote humanity and promote the development of humanity. And that's why we have these classes. Because if any of you were to take the role of the president tomorrow, what would you actually do? You want peace on the world? What does that look like? That's why we bring these teachers here. That's why we bring Megan and Jason, Daniel, and Robert, who have done these classes so far. And I won't go any further. I'm going to pass it off to Jason. So go ahead, Jason.
All right.
Should we do like a handshake? Like
absolutely.
Here we go. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. I'll be in the control room.
Okay. All right. So I want to follow up with what Jose brought up about this meeting that occurred earlier today of the International Peace Coalition. One of the things that came up in it was, what is the identified mission of the United States right now? And I believe the same man that Jose was just referring to, Larry Wilkerson, I believe he was the one who said this. He said that it's become a security state. That the U.S.'s only real reason to exist is to continue existing as a power. He said the same thing is true of Israel right now. Israel is trying to maintain its existence, and that's about it as far as an identity. Now, the question of leadership means giving a mission, giving a purpose. For the United States, what should its purpose be? Should a country even have a purpose? Or is that something that's just for people? So that's what I want to get at through a few things today. In terms of identifying missions, I want to take a short tour of the world. One thing is jobs, economic development. I have some statistics here about poverty in the world. I chose, this is not the number that's usually used, it's usually lower, but I looked at what percentage of people in the world live on less than $7 a day in what's called PPP terms. So $7 a day. In the 80s and 90s, it was about 70% of the world. Anyone want to hazard a guess at what percent it is today? What percent of people live on less than $7 a day? 70% 20 years ago. Today?
30.
Okay.
45.
45, okay. 50. Latin America. It was 50% 20 years ago. Now it is
Lower.
lower.
All right.
Good. Yeah, 25.
Oh,
China, 90% in 2000.
90%.
90% of people in China in the year 2000 lived on less than $7 a day. That was Today, less than 25%. So there's been enormous progress in some areas, but not everywhere. So there's a lot, that could be a purpose for the United States. What can be done to help and underdevelopment to eliminate poverty? How about in science? Are there any scientific breakthroughs that you can think of that should be made, that people should be working on or are working on that you're really looking forward to? What are we trying to learn about the universe right now? Do we know it all already?
It's time travel.
Time travel, okay. That might be convenient or scary. What else? What other breakthroughs are waiting to be made? What are some things that we don't know about that we should?
Our ocean. We only know like 5% of it.
Okay, we don't know a lot about the ocean's huge. Most of it's totally unexplored. That's true.
How a lot of neurological diseases occur.
Okay, neurological disease, maybe disease in general. We don't understand all diseases, that's for sure.
Cancer.
Cancer, that's the big one, where it's, extra tricky because it's your own body cells, so it's harder to go after it like a disease that's got something from the outside.
Controlling the pace of aging.
Controlling aging, and
Right?
Yeah, I'm just smart because it makes me think of that weird Brian Johnson's weird routine. But okay, maybe I'm the only one who knows about that. All right. Yeah, cures for diseases. What else? Is there anything about physics that we don't know? Anything about chemistry, biology?
We don't know what we don't know.
Oh, we don't know what we don't know. Well, what are some of the? Is there anything else that we know we don't know? So some of the things that were brought up was, the oceans. We know that we haven't explored most of the oceans. A lot of diseases. We know that we don't know how to cure them. Is there anything about the atom or the nucleus that we know we don't know? Maybe we just don't know enough about. Okay, nuclear fusion.
There you go.
That would be a good one. You want to tell everybody what nuclear fusion is?
Sure. Nuclear fusion is a process when two atoms smash together and they release all this energy. Very broad terms, right? And so two atoms fuse together and they create a new element, and it releases a lot of energy, more than splitting an atom releases, which is called fission, when you split an atom in half. So right now we have like the nuclear power plants, which run on fission. So those plants split atoms, and the energy that is generated from splitting those atoms is what we harness. But fusion would have a more yield power, because when you put two atoms together and you smash them together, they make even more energy.
So it causes an explosion, or just like
Basically, yeah. And you would need to be able to control it and harness it. Yeah.
So where have we seen fusion? Where do we see fusion every day?
The sun.
The sun. That's what powers the sun. The sun is small nuclei, hydrogen, helium, coming together, becoming a higher element on the periodic table, releasing a huge amount of energy. We have done fusion here on Earth. When you brought up an explosion, that's a kind of nuclear weapon. So the H-bomb is a fusion weapon, much more powerful than the ones dropped on Japan at the close of World War II. So it would be nice if we had something that was, not explode and kill tens of thousands of people. And if we could do it on a small scale and use that to create energy, that would be great. That's what the sun is doing. So instead of trying to use solar panels to collect a little bit of sunlight, let's just go right to the source and be the sun. You get plenty of energy. So that could be a mission for the United States. That's something that would, it's hard you really can't overestimate how important that would be for changing our lives here on the Earth. One of the things is, so out west, in the western states, there's a lot of trouble with water, right? Droughts, deserts, places that do a lot of agriculture are relying on their sucking water from underground. It's not replenishing. They're using it up. It's like fossil water. They're using it up. Where could California, for example, get more water? Is there any water source near to California that it might use? This is a geography quiz here.
There's a pretty big one right next to it.
Yeah, Pacific Ocean, right? There's lots of water right next to California. The question is making it something that be useful. If you just pour ocean water on your crops, you're gonna kill them all. You're not gonna have any food. So there's a process where you can take the salt out of the water. Now, how does nature do that? Why do we have water on the Earth that isn't salty? Where did it come from? Where did the fresh water come from? What made it?
Condensation.
Condensation? You want to say a little more?
I was saying, how the water cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So when it goes to the rain, and then it filters out.
Rain. Yeah, rain is fresh water. So how did the water that comes down this rain, what brought it into the atmosphere in the first place? How did it get up there to then fall down?
Evaporation of the sun.
Yeah. So the sun powers evaporation from the oceans, and the rivers and lakes too, but mostly it's oceans. And then you have pure water, it rains down. 90% of that falls right back in the ocean. So that's not very helpful. That's a total waste. Very inefficient. Nature does a terrible job on this. The amount of energy, if you looked at all the sunlight striking the oceans of the Earth, compared to the amount of fresh water that we get, it uses 1,000 times more energy than if we made the water ourselves. Evaporating water, condensing it, it's a lot of energy. Instead, what are some ways that we get salt out of water today? There's countries that build these plants to take the ocean water and make it fresh. What do? What happens inside those plants? What do you know?
Oil.
Right. The first ones they would do the process that what's your name?
Sakib.
That Sakib described. Right. They boil the water and then they condense it. So like Saudi Arabia's got a very big desalination plant that works that way. Are there any other ways to get salt out of water? Osmosis. You basically push it through. It's basically a filter that's so good that it'll even filter out salt. You can think of it that way. So yeah, you can push water through a filter. If we make water that way, it's 1,000 times more efficient than the sun doing it. That's pretty great. But we need the energy to do it. It's still a lot of energy. Fusion would totally transform our relationship to the ocean. Now, a state like California, all of the coastal cities, 65% of urban water use in California is in places right along the coast. If all that was desalination, right there you'd be freeing up more water from the Colorado River for agriculture. So, that's just a small idea of what a big increase in power could mean for us as a species. Okay, so back to the purpose for a nation. So we talked about some discoveries to make. We talked about poverty to eliminate. How about culture? Can there be a cultural purpose for a nation or a society, or even an individual? Can a person have a good, or a country have a good cultural purpose? What would that mean?
Unity.
Not having people do drugs on the street.
That would be nice. Matthias?
Yeah, I was thinking like rebuilding or renovating completely some ancient ruins,
Oh.
like Acropolis, for example,
Uh-huh.
Greece, or even trying to find Atlantis finally.
Okay, this could be cultural endeavors, cultural explorations. Well, and then think about the making of the Acropolis in the first place. That wasn't done by just a couple people. This is the big building at the on the hill in Athens. This wasn't done by just a couple people in their spare time. This is a social project to build a beautiful temple. What other great cultural works took the efforts of a lot of people?
The Cologne Dam, the Cologne Cathedral.
The Cologne Cathedral in Germany, yeah. Took a lot of people and a very long time. How about individual people? Can an individual person make a cultural contribution? What are some individual people that have made what you would call a cultural contribution?
Thanks.
Okay. How so?
Because he's an artist.
And what did he contribute? What did he do?
Art.
Very thoughtful. Thanks.
Thanks.
Michelangelo.
Michelangelo. All right. What did he do?
He did the Sistine Chapel, right?
Okay, yeah, he did. So we got painters, you could have musicians, you could have somebody who could write an opera that Jose's not going to say is boring, some by Verdi. Sorry, that was on the street. I shouldn't have said that. Excuse me.
No, I'll go on record. Nabucco is boring.
Okay, yeah, some of them they can really drag. Yeah.
That's on the record. That's Jose Vega thinks Verdi's operas can be boring.
So okay, what's the new form of that? What's better than that?
Broadway.
So Hamilton. So is Hamilton? Well, it's about a good theme. It's about a wonderful person. Is that a cultural contribution?
I suppose.
Is it a cultural advancement?
It's better than a lot of the schlop that's out there now.
Okay. Its subject matter is definitely better. Talking about a very
Yeah.
important and good person. That's
I
true.
think generally speaking, entertainment is not a good cultural endeavor
Okay.
for a society.
So what makes entertainment different from a useful culture?
Well, I think generally entertainment tends to cause the audience not to think.
Okay.
Essentially.
I disagree. I think Shakespeare's pretty entertaining.
Is that when people want to have some entertainment? Is that a common form of entertainment today?
It's not the mainstream one. So
Yeah.
no.
Well, think about what is. Think about what is entertainment. What are people watching on Netflix and so forth? Is that
TikTok.
TikTok? Is that what kind of things do you find there? Is that mostly that overall improving? Is this a cultural contribution like the Acropolis or like the Sistine Chapel or the Dome of Florence or the good Verdi operas?
Not really.
Yeah, I don't think so. So we're going to have in 2 weeks, we're going to have a presentation on this issue specifically of culture. So I'm not going to, we'll leave it there on that for today. So in terms of how to make a national mission move forward, I wanted to bring up something that just concluded today, which was the FOCAC, the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. This is a big event. 54 nations, China and 53 African nations coming together. The leaders of 50 of those countries were there in person. Have you, has that been on the news? That some people are talking about on Twitter a lot? Has anybody heard of that? Did anyone know that's happening that doesn't read the EIR Daily Alert? So I think that, you can see from this is every 3 years, China and the African nations that want to participate have a joint forum. And usually out of this comes plans for development, business, and things like this. I think it's a very good thing. So purpose, a nation's purpose, I think sort of implies, if it even could have one, to me that means that there must be some idea of progress, of actually getting better. Can you say in history whether things are getting better or worse in any particular country or time? Is it valid to say better or worse about historical trends? Are there good things in history and bad things? Is anyone uncomfortable with that? I think most people probably say yes, of course. There's good things and bad things.
The plague was a little rough.
The plague, okay. Black Death, no, that's definitely not a good thing. Okay. All right. We've had
Crusades, too.
the Crusades, yep. Well, there's an idea, we were speaking a little earlier about if you cut to the heart of the world and try to identify its problems, the source of its problems, what that source is, which is a complex and major issue. And one of the things that comes up is identifying the people that are doing bad things. You got to know that. The other thing is, why do so many good or potentially good people sit back? Why do they either let evil occur or not recognize it and don't even realize they're letting it occur? Think that they can get ahead themselves by working with it a little bit? What's going on culturally inside people that does that? And there is a scientific concept that actually plays a role in people's views of this. Has everybody heard of the laws of thermodynamics or entropy? Does that ring a bell? Entropy? Okay. Seeing some looks of I hated my physics class. Why are you bringing this up? Okay, can anyone say what they know entropy to be? What is this concept?
Just moving from a more organized state to a less organized state.
Okay, moving toward the disordered, less organized state. Yeah, so there's a physics concept called the second law of thermodynamics. It says in the universe as a whole, over time, entropy increases. Disorder increases. What does that mean? Is that true? Like, what do you think that, even if you've never heard this before, what do you think that might mean? Looking for hypotheses. How do you interpret?
We're all doomed.
We're all doomed, okay. How's that?
Because it would mean that there's no form, like any structure you point to, a government or a building or anything, is ultimately can't last. It's eventually going to break down.
Mm-hmm.
Bit of an irony in that, though, right? Because there is no order except for the order that will be orderless, or that it's decaying to no order. Why does it have to follow that trend, though? I don't know if I'm making sense.
Well,
I don't understand what you're saying.
Jason maybe did.
let me try and see. You tell me if this is what you're saying. You're saying, well, how can it be that there's no order in the world, but there's an order, a direction that we're going, which is more chaos?
Yes.
So I think there's a couple different ideas of order there. So order sometimes means over time, like what order do you do things in? Another thing is just, is it orderly? Like do you have things put together? Like if you have a puzzle and you put it together, it's very orderly. If it's in the box, it's a mess. So this second law of thermodynamics says that overall the universe tends towards the puzzle falling apart and being in a bunch of pieces and shaken up in a box. The universe heads towards being a mess like that.
Okay.
So is that true? Any thoughts on that? Does the universe, think about some period of history, maybe even a short period of history like the Earth, has it gotten more disorderly or more orderly? Less structured, more structured? What's been the direction in time? What's happened?
Well, the universe, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if any of us in this room know a whole lot about the whole universe, so maybe as an example, let's just maybe take the Earth, the history of the Earth and the solar system, which we're all experts in, of course. Well, compare the Earth today to a billion years ago. If we went back a billion years, what would be different on the Earth?
Super hot, right?
Yeah, it would be hotter. What would we find on it?
Better atmosphere.
Okay. How's that? What makes an atmosphere better or worse than another?
All I can think of is the Industrial Revolution.
Oh,
When all that, like chemicals being released, pretty much from there it started like affecting the atmosphere.
that's true. Well, there were more volcanoes a billion years ago too, unfortunately, and they
But
put all
that's
sorts of
something
mess.
natural compared to like something like that we put together, which harms it even more. Like
Mhm.
the sun's UV rays could go through it even better, like now compared to let's say a billion years ago.
So so you said the volcano's natural, so that's kind of in a different category. Is it because it's not harmful, or
It's not because it's harmful. It's like it occurred naturally. It's not like no human went and made that. You know what I mean? Versus like technology and stuff like that.
well, it's definitely different. Yeah, I mean, people do things that nature doesn't on its own. That's for sure. So when you talk about whether something could be good or bad, is that something that we only think of about when we're talking about things people do, or could we use those words good or bad about nature too?
I'm basically saying that stuff like let's say like you brought up volcanoes, right? Volcanoes, yeah, it harms the environment, of course, when it erupts, it will harm the environment, but it's like a energy that piles up to release on its own. Like it can't just like silence all the energy. Versus, let's say what we're doing purposely, which like actually harms the planet.
So we have a choice.
Yeah,
We have a choice. The volcano didn't choose
right.
to do what it did. It's just a volcano, right? That's very important. We've got free will, so we can choose to do things that are good or bad. So a billion years ago, would we find some people if we went in our time machine? Let's say we get our time travel going, we go back a billion years. Are we going to find people that we can talk with a billion years ago?
No.
No. Are we going to find squirrels or cats that we can pet?
Probably not.
Okay. Are we going to find fruits to eat?
Maybe.
You maybe find bacteria and that's it. To make it short.
Yes, that's about it. Yeah. So no plants, no animals, no people, volcanoes. As far as the atmosphere goes, I think you're referring to the ozone layer blocking UV light. So there also wasn't an ozone layer at that time because that came from. So the atmosphere that we've got now with all this oxygen in it that we can breathe, that was made by bacteria. The non-living Earth did not create what's important about the atmosphere to us. Life did. So I think over time, from just kind of volcanoes and rocks and a little bit of bacteria, you have plants and creatures come onto the land, animals, and then people. which can be good or bad because we have free will. To me, it sort of says that the universe is moving in a direction towards more order, towards, I'm going to say, better. Those improvements that nature took millions of years to do, the development of animals or warm-blooded creatures or mammals, all these advancements, they take a very long time. Once people come on the scene, the history of the Earth changes. Because now with one new discovery, one thought, you can totally change your relationship to nature, how you might affect that environment, how you might improve it, how you could damage it. And when we say improve or damage, I think we've got to look in terms of what? Like, are you improving its ability to support life? Are you improving its ability to support cognition? Should we be real conservationists and say that life should never have arisen on the Earth and try to kill everything to go back to the natural order of, 2 billion years ago? Yeah, that would be bad. So let me read a quote from Lyndon LaRouche here. So Lyndon LaRouche is a wonderful man. He ran for president 8 times. He founded the LaRouche movement. Here's what he had to say about thermodynamics. This isn't his economics textbook. He says, under assorted academic and other auspices, one is frequently confronted by references to one or more of 3 putative laws of thermodynamics. Except for the lazy fellows who never challenge the authenticity of assertions offered by textbooks, dictionaries, and encyclopedias, a reasonable amount of inquiry into the source of these laws discloses that the notion of law employed is a legislative, not a scientific law. The LaRouche's view is that the second law of thermodynamics, that the universe tends towards disorder, is not a universal principle. People said it was, but just because you say something's a scientific law, and maybe a lot of people say it, it doesn't mean it's right. People make mistakes. And in this case, he's saying that it created culturally a whole view that the whole universe is going to shit, and really why bother doing anything anyway? Because eventually we're going to run out of energy, and the whole universe is going to turn into warm mush. Depressing. It's also the opposite of what our experience has been. Development of our species and our abilities. So to come back to some of those scientific frontiers, there's a lot of questions that we don't know. One of the issues is, I'll just bring up a couple. One of them is dark matter. Has anybody heard of this idea of dark matter? Can anyone say what that is? Black holes? Black holes are, okay. Well, it's a little different, but similar. Black holes we can't see, light can't get out of them. Dark matter, though, is something even different.
Dark matter supposedly it's like 97%, at least according to what we can tell, like 97% of all that exists, right, in the universe, or something of this nature.
Why do we need it? Why do we need dark matter?
I don't really know. Like it helps us solve some sort of, it's like a theoretical thing that solves some mathematical inconsistencies that we found.
Yeah. If it existed, then we could explain how fast, so in a galaxy, like our Milky Way, these things moving around in spirals, the further away you are, you have different speeds based on how close you are to the center of the disk. Just like the planets have different speeds when they're close or far away. But the stars don't move the way you think they should move. They move too fast to get further and further out. And so people said, well, if there was just this other matter that we can't see, it doesn't interact with anything, but not black holes, because you can see them by the fact that they block light. This dark matter stuff, there's no way to even really tell it's there, except it has mass. So no one's ever seen a dark matter. No one's measured one. There is a real anomaly. The explanation might not be right. Maybe instead of a new thing, we need a new principle. How about in the quantum world? Does anyone know much about quantum mechanics, with quantum physics?
Quarks.
Quarks? What about quarks?
Quarks are supposedly subatomic particles, so I'm not sure how convinced I am by that.
Okay. Yeah, they're said to make up protons and neutrons and some other things. So quantum, does anyone know where we use quantum things in life? Well, so first off, let's talk about quantum. If you keep going down very, very, very small, so like if you take a rock and you break it in half, you have two rocks. You break them in half, you have two rocks. Eventually, if you stop having a rock,
You stop.
okay, it becomes a pebble. All right.
But it's still like a rock.
You get to the atom.
And eventually you get to, you might have just like, here's an oxygen, and then that's not a rock anymore, that's one atom, yeah. So, there's something different when we get to that very small level. And Einstein and Planck, so around between the years 1900 and 1905, figured out that there were things that occur in the universe that seem like they're not predictable. So if you take a physics class and they say, somebody throws a ball and, where's it going to land? They threw it from here at this speed, at this angle, and you can figure out, how far away it'll land. They say you can determine that exactly. But we know that there's things now that seems like you cannot predict what will occur. Like if you have a radioactive element that decays over some period of time. You can't predict when it's going to happen. You can know if you've got a bunch of them, how long it takes for half of them to decay. That's the half-life of the nuclide. But for any particular one, we don't have any way of predicting that. So that's just another example. For national purposes, these are some mysteries of nature that we don't have yet. I'll just mention biology and then come to fusion, and that'll be the sort of the last big topic. So biology, we talked about neurological diseases, we talked about cancer. One thing is viruses. So we've made a lot of antibiotics to kill bacteria. We can kill pretty much any bacteria except for some of the ones that are now becoming resistant. So we've always got to stay ahead of them. But we can really take care of bacteria. What about viruses? If you have a virus, is there usually right now a medicine that does something for it? No, not most of them. I mean, for some there are. If you have HIV, for example, there's definitely very effective drugs that have, dropped the number of people actually getting AIDS down dramatically, very effective. But for most viruses, no. We don't have general antivirals. That would be a wonderful thing to have. How about individual treatments? I mean, some advances in cancer treatment might not be possible without having something that's for each individual patient. Because there's a lot of different ways a cancer can form. There's a lot of ways your cells can go funny. So maybe there'd have to be something specific to each person, individualized healthcare in that way, or treatments. That would be something, that's a mission. Okay, last one on fusion and plasma. I want to talk a bit about, just kind of give a scale to some of this stuff. So if you use, if we need energy, we need to run a factory. What are some of the first ways that people ran factories and machines without using their own muscles or an animal? What are some of the first ways that we powered equipment?
Coals.
Coal?
Yeah.
Okay. Even before coal, what did we use before coal? Was there anything that was used?
Water, river.
Water, yeah. So some of the very early one is you got water going by, it spins the wheel. What else? What's another really old, ancient, antique way that back in the ancient past we used to get power?
Windmills.
Windmills, yeah. Okay, so water, wind, these are physical forms of energy. The water's moving, the wind is blowing. You turn that directly into using it physically. Let's say you got water going through a hydroelectric dam today. Similar kind of thing. You're turning it into electricity, but really it's just the physical motion of the water. You're turning it into power. Let's say that, imagine you got a typical hydroelectric dam. And instead of being filled with water, it was filled with gasoline. If you burn an amount of gasoline compared to running it through a hydroelectric dam, how much more energy could you get using its chemical power than just its physical weight? Does anyone have even a rough guess on this?
I bet it's a lot more.
Okay, you mean like 5 or maybe 6?
50 times.
1,000.
Keep going, a million times more energy. So from these old things, ancient things,
Is that
water
actually a
and-
million?
Yeah, it's a million.
Oh,
Yeah.
Not hyperbole, it's like a million.
It's really a million. Yeah. I mean, within an order of magnitude. Yeah. So, we went from these physical sources to chemical ones. So, like coal, for example. Same thing with coal. A mass of coal compared to a mass of water, a million times more energy. Natural gas is even better. So we went from physical things to chemical things. What else can you do with coal besides run an engine? What are some other things that you can do in a coal-powered economy that you couldn't with just windmills and water wheels and so forth?
Grilled chicken.
You can use it to cook. That's true. Your windmill is not going to grow the chicken. All right.
Create steam.
You can create steam. You want to steam something?
No, I mean for steam engine.
Oh yeah. So are there things besides the engine aspect of coal? What else does coal bring into an economy besides running engines, which is the big one, and heating for sure,
Maybe,
cooking?
tools, right?
How so? How does coal help us make tools?
Trying to remember, it's like
Like a blast furnace.
yeah, like I
Oh.
remember the picture, but I don't remember how it's done.
Yeah, I've got and if you've already seen this before, especially from me, don't shout out the answer. So this is,
Uranium.
it's not, it's plutonium, look out. All right, so here's a rock, you can just pass it around and take a look at it. And, this is a important resource. Does anybody know what that rock is used for? If you have not heard it from me before.
Yes, what's it used for?
Yeah, why is that? That's an important rock even nowadays.
You should put it in the camera.
To build?
Hey Chad,
Bill?
what rock is this?
So, I should have held it up. Here, actually, let me hold it up on that.
Yeah.
I'll put it back, I just want to make sure our home viewers. Here it is. So this was used by the Egyptians for one purpose. You know what the Egyptians used it for? Well, what do you notice about it? Does this look like most rocks that you see? It's got a color.
To break up the stone, right?
Ah, okay. Could you use it, physically to break up stone?
Yeah.
It had a more specific use. It's related to the way that it looks.
Jewelry.
Jewelry, painting, like makeup. Egyptians used it because it's a beautiful green color.
Is it not?
No, that's a bluer color.
Yeah, just those things.
This is malachite, is the name of this rock here. Now, today we don't use it so much for paint and jewelry, although you can, it looks nice. What do we use it for something totally different today that's only possible because of coal. Yeah.
Uranium, I guess, is inside.
Uranium inside?
I would hope not.
There might be a little bit, but malachite isn't usually used as it's not an ore that we mine for uranium.
Natural gases?
No. Copper. That is copper ore. Yeah, it's like as soon as the copper rusts, it becomes a greenish color, or oxidizes. That's it. That's basically rusted copper. So once you've got coal in large amounts and you turn it into another thing called coke, which is similar to coal but different, you can use that to transform it chemically. What you do is you suck the oxygen out of it and unrust it. And that's how we make metals, like iron. We don't really find just bars of iron under the ground in a mine. We find rusted iron. And we got to pull all that oxygen out. And then we got our beautiful iron, and it tries to go back to its natural state. It rusts. So you got to replace metal or take care of it. So this is, not only do we have a lot more energy using the chemical world than just the physical one, a million times more energy there, but we can do totally different things. We can make metals now. The Bronze Age, this was the Iron Age. This is because of chemistry, basically. So the nuclear age is the next step. Power is one of the things that means. Nuclear medicine is another one. We can do really specific scans to look for cancers, or do biological studies by using radioactive elements in small quantities. They can then trace something in your body. Maybe you use a compound that cancer cells take up, they really want it, and then you do a scan of the person and you can see, oh, hey, you're glowing right here. Okay, that means we need to check you out. So what all the potentials are going to be of a nuclear economy? I'm not sure. We don't know yet. We'll find out once we get there. Now, that number a million, it applies again. If you go from chemical energy, so if you have a massive coal and a massive uranium, a million times more energy in that uranium, a million. It's hard to grasp how big a million is. Can we find two things in this room that we think were one's a million times bigger than the other? Or maybe we'd have to use the whole room as one of the things.
A particle of dust.
Okay, I don't have a very intuitive sense of how big a particle of dust is. But I'm finding it hard to relate to that because it's real small.
Yeah, like how many pennies would fill this room?
Okay. Well, how about this room? So so if you take something, how much bigger do you have to make something in each of its dimensions to make it a million times bigger overall? Do you stretch it out 10 in each direction? Does that make it a million times bigger? So if we do 1,000 this way, 1,000 this way, 1,000 this way, we'll have a billion times.
So 100.
Yeah, 100, 100, 100, 2, 4, 6 zeros total. So million. So what's only 1/100th as tall as the room, 100th as long? Is there anything in here that looks like it's about 1/100th as tall? How tall is this wall? Yeah, let's say 100 inches. So that makes it easy. So 1 inch by, this is about the same, 1 inch by 2 inches. So something like this. So you compare uranium filling this little dish compared to coal filling this whole room. And so you can see why nuclear plants are really inexpensive to operate. That's why the power they produce is cheap, because you don't need to do a lot of mining. You don't need to transport huge amounts of coal and store it and mine it, dig it up. It's a lot of work. So, okay, let's move on now. The last kind of thing I wanted to mention was about the progress being made on fusion. So the U.S. government is absolutely idiotic on this, on funding investment in discovering how to make nuclear fusion energy a reality. It's underfunded it for decades. Why he doesn't want it to happen? Because there are people who don't want it to happen. Can you think of a reason why some kind of people might not want a new form of energy that creates lots of energy? Who might oppose that?
If I'm a fossil fuel company, I'm not going to want nuclear because it's more advanced, right? And we would rely less on my product, right?
That seems plausible. Okay, so maybe the oil companies wouldn't want fusion. What about the solar companies? Are they excited about this? How about a bigger question? Who doesn't want development on this planet? I mean, the fact that here in 2024, we've still got poverty anywhere on this planet, how is that even possible? Or, let me phrase it differently, could that not be intentional? Is there a goal of preventing development? Why would some kind of people want to stop countries or people from developing? What's in it for them? Why would they want to do that? Why would they want to hold people back? Think evil.
A rules-based order.
Okay.
Cattle.
Cattle, you said? Yeah, if you really don't like people, and as far as you're concerned, as long as you have enough servants, the rest of the people can go to hell, you're not going to want development. When a poor country develops, how does its relationship to other countries change?
It can become a trade partner.
Become a trade partner. Okay.
Independence.
Independence. It's a lot harder to take advantage of a country. You're saying?
Power.
Power. Yeah, you got more power to make your own. So if your view of the so-called developing world, as it was for the U.S. in the 70s when this was official policy, is that these countries should not develop because we want those resources instead, then you're going to say we're going to stop development. So attack fusion is one of the ways of doing that. In a bigger way, and this is where I wanted to talk about some of the source of the problems in the world, is the ideas that you might carry in your own mind that you don't realize are holding you back. Or worse than holding you back, killing people. One of the biggest ones that we encounter these days is green ideology. So, do we want clean air and water, of course. But the goal of some of these groups, it's a lot more than that. It's very explicitly, people are the problem. A lot of them will tell you there should be fewer people. There's nothing you can do. If the population keeps growing, no matter what we do, we're screwed. So we got to stop that population growth. You're the British Empire, this flavor of environmentalism is wonderful for you because you can get people who are trying to do something good to help you prevent other countries from developing. Has anybody heard of the term appropriate technology? What's appropriate technology? What does that mean?
Sustainability.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Rain collection of water.
Yeah, appropriate technology is this disgusting term for people that are saying, well, how do we help a country develop but not too much? So they'll say, I took a class on this in college, I left after the first class, it was so gross. Because it was, what they did is they had a bicycle and a bunch of buckets, like paint buckets, big paint buckets. And they're like, how many people and paint buckets can you get on this bike and go from one end of the room to the other? So people put in the buckets, on the handlebars, someone's sitting on the handlebars and behind, holding a bucket, you're trying to do all this. And they're saying, this is the kind of creativity that's really needed to develop these poor countries. And I'm thinking, how about a bus? How about a truck? How about electricity? I mean, the idea that people that are some elite place are going to say, well, how can we put a different kind of handlebar on a bike so people can carry more buckets is fucked up. Because it's saying you're not really going to develop. You're going to mostly stay poor, but I feel bad about that, so here's a little something. I sent a goat to a farmer in a poor country somewhere. I'm doing a good thing. I sent them a goat. I made a gift.
Just enough.
Just a little bit. It is nice the person gets a goat, I suppose, but a lot of that is for you. Okay?
AOC was in Puerto Rico. She was, rechargeable light bulbs? Like you can leave the light bulbs out in the day, and then they'll be charged by the sun.
Yeah.
So you can use them at night.
There, that's one. Obama did this thing where there was some thing about a soccer ball light bulb thing. So it's a soccer ball, so you can play soccer. And it spins around a little generator inside it. And then at night, you can kind of hang it on a hook and it'll be a light for you to do your homework with. And he said, isn't this great? Now kids can do their homework. It's like, how about an electrical grid? How screwed up do you have to be to propose that and say, well, that's a good thing? Like, are you looking at these other people as human beings? As the potential genius who's going to cure, your daughter's cancer? But won't have that opportunity if they're, getting light from a soccer ball instead of having a lab to work in. So some of these axioms that hold us back. The green stuff, it has that effect. Reason itself, two more. Reason itself is attack. The idea that thinking can actually solve problems. And this comes up in economics, with the idea that the free market is always the best way. Has anybody heard this idea? If you just let everyone have freedom to do what makes sense for them economically, then overall we'll all come out ahead. Because everyone's going to try and build a better product, and then they'll figure out some advancement because they want to make money. What do you think? Is that true, false, partly true?
I mean, it sounds great, and I heard it was actually a former US president saying, like, if everyone thinking of its own, of itself, himself, itself, then everyone thinks about someone. So you don't think about anyone else because everyone thinks about herself. So problem solved.
That makes sense.
So,
That makes sense.
it makes sense. It sounds great.
Sounds good. I mean, and there is something partly true to it. I mean, being able to take initiative and figure out some new way of doing something and making a lot of money doing it, which you're not just going to necessarily spend on yourself. Now you can start some other business that interests you or something. I don't want to make too much of Elon Musk, but for example, use SpaceX, reusable rockets. That's a great thing. He's not doing it just to make money. He's obviously excited about space, but that kind of initiative can be really good. But it doesn't do everything. One of the biggest things it doesn't do well is things that we use in common. What are some things that we use in common that aren't making anybody any money? Like, when we buy shoes, the shoe company's getting some money from us. What are some things that we use that nobody's really making money for doing?
Right now,
Yeah, what are some things that you did for free or at a very low cost that you didn't pay to do, but it still took work to provide for you?
go to the park.
A park, okay. And when you went to the park, how'd you get there?
Drove.
On
Roads.
a road, right? So there are tolls on the bridges, but overall roads, you don't have to pay to use a road. You don't have to pay to walk down the sidewalk directly. You don't
Yeah,
have to
well,
pay.
they make a lot of money on the roads in New York, and you can't get across them with a car.
Contractors do. They come out, they make a lot of money. Yeah, infrastructure, common goods. These are something that it doesn't work at all. So the idea that everything should make financial sense as if it were a business, that really holds back the ability to finance infrastructure. I mean, that's not how Roosevelt did the New Deal projects, although they did pay for themselves. And then the last one was, another issue is that so right now there is, in part due to all the cultural turmoil going on right now, some people are saying, well, what we need to do is turn back to tradition. You're hearing this, maybe people see certain excesses in some areas of culture and they say, this is getting really weird. We should go back to traditions. What do you think about that approach? What's the value? What should the value of tradition be?
Yeah, all I know is there are some really bad traditions in the past, or bad thinking, and some good traditions too.
So the tradition is just, it used to happen, so it's good, which is dumb, because obviously there's good ones, and sacrificing people on the top of a pyramid, that's not a good tradition.
I think that also applies to the idea of like sustainability. What are you sustaining? Because sustainability is kind of just a word for not changing, right? Being consistent, staying the same. So some things we do want to change, and other things we might not. We do want to conserve like national parks as the way they are, not settle them. But it's not like a blanket term you can just throw at everything and just say we have to be sustainable. Like it depends.
Yeah. So I think I just leave that one hanging as another issue. You can't just say tradition is good. I don't think there's many people saying that these days. But if a tradition is good, it's good because it's good. So the opposition to cultural wackiness isn't tradition, it's classical. It's classical culture, a culture of development and a certain identity of the human being, about which Megan will say more in 2 weeks. So last thing, I wanted to just read a couple more quotes from Lyndon LaRouche about, coming back to something that was brought up earlier, the mental or neurological disease, right? How about mental health as a sort of slightly more general concept? I read there was a school shooter in Tennessee. This may have been a couple of years ago now. It was a trans person, killed maybe about 14 people.
It was last year.
Last year. This person's journal was just published, and it's pretty scary to look at. And, you know, I was looking through it, and the biggest thing, I mean, clearly somebody's not well, thinking that life is just painful, that they didn't have any purpose, and so forth. I guess the question it raises is, can a psychologist define sanity? Is sanity something about your behavior and like feeling about yourself, or does there have to be something broader? Can a culture be insane? If you're in a group with a bunch of crazy people, you might all think everything's fine. You might get along well, you might have good friendships, but you're all crazy. So how about this? Our purpose in life is to, quote, find a means to make our having once lived to be of durable advantage to both our contemporaries and our society's posterity in general. We must make some contribution to the human condition. Here it is. Mental health has always expressed itself, he says, as a political movement. Why does he say this? Mental health has always expressed itself as a political movement. You got a lot of people right now using drugs, whether illegal or prescribed, or legal but not prescribed, to make themselves feel better in various ways. You got lots of people trying to figure out why they're depressed or anxious or so forth. Some of the biggest reasons to be depressed or anxious right now, they're not personal. They're the threat of World War III. They're the fact that the U.S. isn't going in a good direction. We could be in a war with Russia and China and have Israel start a war with Iran all at the same time. If that's getting you down, it's not because, this isn't a personal problem of you being depressed. The way to fight that depression would be to do something about it. Now, there are people with, mental issues that should receive professional help. I'm not saying that's not true, but, I get depressed thinking about the world, and I think a big thing to do about it is to do something about it. Mental health and the means by which it is produced as a cultural standard of reference by society or by groups within society are one and the same thing. A politically passive state of mental health cannot, by definition, exist. Mental health is good, and good must define itself by combat against evil. Mental health is, like scientific discovery, always polemical in character. Truth exists only in the form of polemics against evil and falsehood. So a national purpose of culture, of development, of mental health, even of individual identity, to me that's countries as well to work together, to say the goal as a nation is to make sure that the people are happy, are entertained happy, but durably, deep down inside you can examine yourself and not be scared of what you find and say, I'm living a life that's good. You can't feel that way if you work for a weapons manufacturer. Okay? No matter what your therapist tells you, right? Because you're doing something bad. So sometimes you can't fight that. Individual circumstances, you got a family, whatever, you might feel like you have to do this. So the question is broader. How do we shape a society where people can live good lives? So that I think is our mission. And that is what I think Jose Vega will help bring to the Congress in January. So that's what I wanted to say.
What?
You should say something.
Yeah.
Okay. Should say something.
You read the quote from the end of the Science of the Human Mind about insanity being, there not being a passive mental, a truly sane mental state that is passive.
Oh. And I'm supposed to respond to that, or just
Or you can just MC, you know.
people have questions?
Was that in the economics class?
Yes.
How?
Well, okay. I mean, some of it's more, I mean, the really direct parts are about looking at economic history over a long span. So not starting from, you know, how does a business make money and balance its books and all that kind of stuff. I mean, sure, fine. But the fact that we went from, you know, hunting and gathering, which is what we still do with water. We still hope we find some water on the ground instead of taking it out of the ocean like civilized people would. So moving from being able hunting and gathering in primitive societies to being able to make metals and energy and electricity and grow, you know, what's behind all of that is something that I think we'll say more about in 2 weeks. There's something very special about human beings that we have that history. Animals don't have histories like that. If somebody wrote a book on the history of cows, they wouldn't need to interview cows from 1,000 years ago or rely on historical documents and read diaries of cows from 1,000 years ago. They're the same cows, mostly. Right? Animals don't change, we do. So a lot of economists don't try to figure out what goes on in the mind of that person who makes the steam engine, who figured out the link between electricity and magnetism, who developed the calculus, who found out how the planets moved, who created the periodic table as a way of understanding the chemical elements. And Lyndon LaRouche's view is that that's the heart of economics. That creative potential of the human being, knowing that from the inside by going back and reading not a textbook, but read the work that the actual genius wrote. Be a genius, not a textbook writer. Read the original sources, work on it. So that's one of the big things. The other thing was fusion as a specific economic driver. So, you know, in terms of economic policy, you gotta have missions. You gotta have goals as a country. You can't just sort of set up a system that'll work well. You have to be specific about it. And Roosevelt in the New Deal didn't just say, we gotta make the economy better. We gotta shut down those fat cats on Wall Street and do something good for people. He said, okay, well, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna build this dam, and we're gonna build this dam, and we're gonna finish this thing. We're gonna build this waterway, and we're gonna help build this railroad, and this school, and this hospital, and we're gonna bind books and libraries across the country and give money for folk arts preservation, you know, write down the folk songs so they're not lost to history, you know, all these kinds of things. It was specific. So what I wanted to say about that is that, you know, fusion is the leading specific goal, and infrastructure are the leading specific goals for moving the economy forward. Let's say the president, not that we've got anybody qualified running for president right now, but let's say there's some divine intervention and, you know, Biden not only becomes, you know, sane but good.
Like Nabucco.
Like, there you go. See, look at that. Cultural contribution from parody. Thank you, Giuseppe. So,
Oh, right? Because he goes from being insane, and then all of a sudden he just wakes up and he's reasonable.
right. So if Nabucco, if we had Bidino, you know, today, Biden becomes sane, he wakes up. If he was going to try and do something good right now, it would have to be specific. We're going to.
It's a really funny idea.
I know, impossible idea, right? For him to come out and say we need fusion, you know, to build up infrastructure, and you know, it's not like he's done that. So
We could lobby him.
yeah, that's real worthwhile, I think. Yeah, go find him on the beach.
There you go.
See if he remembers what you said.
Any other questions?
Thoughts?
So when I first learned the second law of thermodynamics, it was a very, I was in a class that was specifically looking at like energy systems, and they were all modeled as closed systems, essentially. And that was the law that I learned, was not that universe, but that in a closed system, entropy tends to increase. So then the question becomes, I think the question is not, is the second law true or false? Because I think it's true as applied to a closed system. So the question is the universe a closed system?
It's a good way to think about it.
And also another way you can think about it is another equivalent formulation of the second law is that there's no simpler heat engine. The simplest possible heat engine, you need both a hot and a cold reservoir, and you need an operating temperature in between those two. So that's anyway.
Yeah, and this came from real work, figuring out how efficient could a steam engine or a heat engine be. The first engine, they weren't very good. They were leaking and terrible. And the question would be, well, how good could we get this? And Carnot did most of the work on this and figured out based on the temperatures, here's how efficient it could possibly be. So the laws of thermodynamics, the first one says that energy is constant. That there's no process occurs where the amount of energy increases or decreases. The gas that goes into your car is chemical energy. In your engine, it becomes heat energy. That heat pushes pistons and makes mechanical energy, drives you down the road until you use your brakes and turn that speed back into heat and braking apart your brake pads. So the first law says that the total amount of energy is limited. So you can't have a perpetual motion machine. You can't have some arrangement of pulleys and levers and things. You start it up and it just spins and powers a factory or something. Not possible. The second one, Max Planck also calls it the second law about perpetual motion machines. He said you can never have a machine that's 100% efficient. You're always going to lose something in any actual machine to heat. Which, I'm not saying that's not true. But how about even the first one, the conservation of energy? Is that true, that the amount of energy cannot be increased or decreased in any reaction, but only changes forms? Is that true today?
There was the experiment, the Livermore Labs. I can't remember what it was. It was they like induced a plasma field, right? I think I don't actually remember the specific details, but I thought there was something about an experiment that they put in a certain amount of energy and what was put out by the reaction was greater than the energy put in.
It's true, they did. So
Is that at Lawrence Livermore?
yeah, Lawrence Livermore, there's a laboratory where there's 192 lasers that all come in at one spot in the very center, and it compresses two forms of hydrogen to an incredible pressure and temperature, and it causes fusion, a small explosion. And yes, they did achieve it, where the amount of energy that came out of that explosion was more than the lasers going in. So where did that energy come from?
The bond, the subatomic or the atomic level bonds between the atoms that were, or this was a fusion? Okay.
Well, friendship.
Friendship?
The friendship of the atom.
Oh, okay. Well, there's something different about, so how about this? We put gas in a car, you burn it, exhaust and water comes out. If you weigh the oxygen that was used and the gasoline, it's the same weight as the exhaust. The matter, there's also conservation of matter. The amount of atoms didn't change, and the kind didn't change. But how about in the fission or fusion reaction? The mass is decreasing. This is Einstein's E equals mc squared. The energy of that reaction corresponds to the mass change times the speed of light squared. So people today would say, okay, well, the first law of thermodynamics isn't quite true, really, because the conservation of energy and the conservation of matter have to sort of come together and be, connected by this new Einstein idea. So that first law isn't quite right. But the question I like to ask is about economic energy. And whether, honestly, did the universe have more energy in it after we discovered nuclear reactions?
Yes. Because we were around to make them. If the universe wouldn't have done it on its own, if we weren't here to make these nuclear reactions. Certainly a lot of energy was released in those bombs we made.
Right, and so these things that might never happen now can, because now we know how to make them happen.
Right.
So I think that's another reason my approach on those laws. The first law, it's out of scope when you apply it to human society. So, heat machines, I'm with you. I don't think LaRouche would disagree and say, no, I made a heat engine that's 200% efficient. No. But the cultural and this comes up. I remember I was campaigning for LaRouche in 2004. He was running for president. And I met a guy on a campus, UC Berkeley. And he said, I'm kind of interested in LaRouche, but I'm supporting, I think, Wesley. And he was supporting some other guy. I said, okay, well, let me give you something to read. I'll call you back. So I call him back. I said, so what did you think about LaRouche's presidential program? He said, why, I can't support a man who believes this about the laws of thermodynamics. And I said, well, do you know what your candidate thinks about the laws of thermodynamics? And then he said, plus, we shouldn't do what you want to do anyway. If we build all this infrastructure and develop the economy, we will speed up the heat death of the universe. And then he hung up the phone. So
he's right.
I don't think everyone is driven that crazy by the laws of thermodynamics, but that's like, he's not alone in thinking that the universe overall is fundamentally doomed. I think that the cultural pessimism is a little bit different, but the three body, anybody familiar with that three body Chinese book?
Yeah, three-body problem.
So I read Three Body a few years ago. I had a Chinese friend who was into science and so forth. And I said, let me see, maybe it's some Chinese science fiction, see if it's like optimistic and uplifting. And have you read it? Yeah, it's not. It's not at all. It's an extremely pessimistic view about the universe as a whole.
So don't put it on my reading list.
No, it was painful. I thought, this is my review.
Who wrote it?
I don't remember his given name. Was Cixin something Liu? Okay.
And when? Just recently.
Maybe a decade ago?
Yeah, this was,
Yeah. Anyway, they made a horrible Netflix thing. Yeah, it was even worse than the book. How we got into that, though? Entropy. The universe is doomed. Oh.
Very quickly on entropy. Why would people even care? Why is there a philosophical derivation from it? Because even if entropy is true, it's still, the projection is that it's like literally quadrillions of years in the future. So why would you derive this like philosophical nihilism from the idea that literally an unfathomable amount of time longer than the universe has already existed in the future, the universe will not exist?
I don't think you derive it, you retroactively.
I can answer. I want to answer the question. We want a child somewhere in the future dying the entropy death.
Quadrillions of years in the future?
Yeah,
They will not even be human anymore. It will be like
Dolphin.
Oh, I see. So if they're not human, you're okay with them dying.
yeah, I mean, a little bit, yeah.
But isn't the point that like what we conceive of as the universe or what we conceive of as God is actually bound up with what we think of? You can't separate that from how you conceive of the nature of your mind.
I can see that.
Because you're right, it's not like it's posed as like a practical
Yeah.
thing. Like, well, all human endeavors is fruitless, so in 10 billion years, when the final empire falls, it will all be meaningless anyway, which is basically what people think about America right now.
Yeah.
But like, we can't account for why we are where we are in time, right? So it has to me at least, I think it has a theological dimension, and the kind of this kind of pseudo secular discussion about the universe is sophistry.
Makes sense.
It also might not be the most gripping project in today's culture. And just, there's other. I don't need that. Never mind. There's one other thing I wanted to say based on that. But, yeah. Any other reflections? I guess we're about to have time to wrap up.
It's about time to wrap up. Any other questions?
Just once.
No?
Oh, I remember what it was. I was going to quote George Bush, or for Simon. He reminded me of the words of the great president, George Bush, who said, I think, I don't care about history, I'll be dead.
I mean,
Well, I've run into that approach talking with my father about this idea of the immortality of the human mind, right? And I'm like talking to my dad, and I'm like talking about like 50 years after my death. Like imagine I was like looking back 50 years after my death. He's like, well, you're not gonna be. You're gonna be dead. You're gonna be non-existent. You're gonna be dead. So you won't care at all. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean.
But here's the thing is, but you care now, even thinking in that way. I mean, that's the other thing too. Is like, I mean, I don't know what happens after we die, but but you know that your life's meaning will still exist in 50 years, so you can do it right now.
Yeah, but the implicit assumption in attacking that idea is that your life doesn't matter in the moment. That like my dad is like a big guy. He's like big on meditation. He's big on like just come to terms with your own existence, so you're not a complete anxious mess, which hasn't worked for him because he's a complete anxious mess. He like drinks all the time and stuff, right? So it's like that doesn't work. It doesn't seem to work for anybody I've met that tries it. Like tries to like meditation, like living your life on the basis of just making yourself feel as though you're not. He thinks that like trying to change things is like ruffling the feathers, or as he often puts it, like poking a house of cards or something like that, which is just very silly ontological outlook.
Well, sort of. I mean, if you start doing it, you might realize that, how big the problem is, or that you actually could be effective.
Yeah.
And once you realize you could be effective, you say, I guess I have to help, don't I? Realize that. Things that people themselves back. Yeah, they got under control. The powers that they run everything. You can't do anything about it. So complain, make YouTube videos. Yeah, it's pretty. It can be a comforting thing. Don't blame me. I can't do anything anyway. Not true.
Yeah, I think that's the question I had about consciousness. I was thinking about like the two guys who aren't as familiar with this language of describing the whole sort of historical process and physical process as economy. I was thinking, well, a lot of this would just seem kind of like its own kind of sophistry or something like that. Like put myself in a position where I don't know. Like trying to talk around some real problems or something like that. But I was thinking about the state of our monetary system and the history of the monetary system. And that's what we're supposed to think is like the serious science of economics. It's like these calculations and these computers and these algorithms and things. And it has brought us to the point of a civilizational collapse and a world war, where the only way that the people that are ruling our financial system can conceive of the relationship between what they call the economy and the real world is to just turn everything, even like matter itself, in the case of carbon credits and things like that, into tokens and commodities, and then to speculate on it. And that's like this. That's the respectable science of economics, right? And yeah, I often have the question when I think through some of these ideas of physical economy. Well, how can it become systematized? Because I think that's like the attraction of this monetary view of the economy is that you just go you memorize the equations, you get the job at the firm or whatever, and you just plug into this machine, this kind of process. But what you're describing about, for example, the intention of a country to rebuild itself, that could only come from actual human intention.
Yeah. And then the other thing that kind of economics fails to, I think, comprehend or include is the massive technological revolutions. Because that, the value of the technological revolution doesn't really fit into economic measure unless you're talking about the incommensurability itself. I didn't express that well, but maybe. If you're looking at the supply and demand curves and this kind of thing, that some of that stuff's not necessarily wrong, especially about a stagnant economy. Closest.
All right, if there's no other thoughts or questions or comments, I would like to wrap up and close up. I think if there's anything you should take away from these classes is, why do we talk about these ideas? Why do we actually talk about the beginning of civilization, entropy, and why human beings are not a product of entropy, but an example of why the universe is actually ordered? I don't know any socialist chapters that talk about this. I don't know any GOP clubs that talk about this. And I think it may have to do with the fact that there has been no positive social change in the United States in the last 50 years or so. Ever since the assassinations of the big Kennedys, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., Fred Hampton, Patrice Lumumba, so on and so forth, nobody has actually been able to effect a real positive change because they don't care about the universe or the role that human beings actually play in it. We're the only ones that actually discuss it, and I think it's reflected in the great work that we do. The work that we do here in the classes and the intellectual work is reflected in our ability to reach the kinds of people we get on the IPC calls, that we get on our Monday night evening calls, the connections we've been able to make, and the things that we've been able to do with this campaign that should be impossible for just some people in the Bronx to do with no corporate money whatsoever, completely grassroots. And we've gone above and beyond most independent campaigns that can never even get an office, let alone reach the $5,000 threshold to even file with the FEC. It's not just because of our grit. It's not just because of our tenacity or our passion. It's our ideas. So with that, I'm going to close out. As usual, we don't have an end card, so I'm just going to hit end stream here. I want to thank everyone. Thank you, SOS USA, for the claps. And